What's going on, everybody? Today is Thursday, January 11th, 2024, the second podcast of this new year, and I'm pretty sure yesterday y'all heard the news. Lots of massive news yesterday as it pertains to coaches. Just about, I'd say in the morning, depending on whatever time zone you're living in, Pete Carroll announces that he's going to be taking a step back from coaching. It's either him or some in the Seattle Seahawks organization. They want him to have at least some kind of role. But the moral of the story, or the big news, is that he's going to be taking a step back from coaching. And then a few hours later, like I said, depending on whatever time zone you're in, Nick Saban announces that he is going to be retiring. This past year was his last year as head coach for the Alabama Crimson Tide. And then, of course, this morning, if you haven't heard the news already here, we'll break it down for you. Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots have mutually agreed to part ways. This is something we all kind of felt and were expecting was going to happen at some point in time during the season or when the season ended. So it's not much of a surprise as the other two. But then to just think about that. 3 Hall of Fame, all-time great head coaches are now taking a step back. I know a lot of people who watch football grew up watching these head coaches. You grew up watching Pete Carroll and his fantastic USC teams, and then what he's done with the Seattle Seahawks, of course, the Legion of Boom, Russell Wilson, and that type of era. And then, of course, with Nick Saban, and he's just coached at LSU, the pedigree that he's had, winning national championships, like all of these head coaches have. The players he's coached, he's put into the NFL, at Alabama, at LSU, and then with Bill Belichick, speaks what he's done speaks for itself. The Super Bowls, the dynasty with the Brady era. A lot of people will say, well, he didn't do much after Tom Brady. When Tom Brady leaves your team, who's going to do that much? I mean, he's Tom Brady, right? Hall of Fame quarterback. Many consider him to be the GOAT. Fantastic, like I said, fantastic resumes. A time to step back and reflect, even though, they've had their, I wouldn't say ups and downs, but some, like for instance, Bill Belichick, it's been a kind of somber, they weren't as competitive this year and that sort of thing. Just like I said, time to step back, appreciate what these coaches have done and, what we've witnessed them do. And with that being said, we've got a lot to talk about with this podcast. We have playoff football. Who do I like? What do I see could potentially be an issue for some teams? While there's at least once every playoffs, a team that's in the wild card and not necessarily a division winner, although sometimes it does happen. They usually, like a 5, 6, 7 seed, they go somewhere long into the playoffs. They go to the divisional round or past the divisional round. Rarely ever do you see them go to the Super Bowl, but sometimes it does happen. Talking about my favorite teams in the wild card that aren't division winners, what's going on with these head coaches? What does that impact mean for Alabama, a school that was a national powerhouse when it came to recruiting? They were in a gold mine of the South with all of these 5 stars and recruits. What is going to happen next? Who's the next head coach of all of these places? The head coaching vacancies, which in my opinion, this is the greatest head coaching or potential head coaches I think ever. So let's just break it down. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments. I appreciate your likes, follows, subscriptions, support. All of that I appreciate. Be a friend, tell a friend, share this podcast out with others. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. Turn on the bell for all post notifications. You don't want to miss any of the draft content I have coming up. And let's just get right into it. Of course, as y'all know, that's textbook. So now what happens next with all of these, with Carroll, Saban, Belichick stepping down? Who's going to fill their shoes? Starting off with the Seattle Seahawks, I think it's going to be an internal hire possibly. Maybe they go to their offensive coordinator, Shane Waldron, and he becomes the next head coach, a lot of popular discussion that they would go with the Cowboys defensive coordinator Dan Quinn, just because he was on that staff with the 2013 team, defensive guy. We've seen what he's done with the Dallas Cowboys unit. Although we have seen, he has been a head coach for the Atlanta Falcons, and we saw the way it went in Atlanta. Maybe with a second opportunity in a team, a organization he's been familiar with, it can work again. I still think that they would go with an internal hire. And then if it's the New England Patriots, listen, for all these NFL teams that have head coach openings, this is the time to strike while the iron's hot right now, because I don't know if I've seen a better list of or qualified candidates for head coaches than I have seen this year. Like, just to toss a couple names: Texans OC Bobby Slowick and what he's done with that unit, and a rookie quarterback, a young team, actually a young offense, and then Mike McDonald, Ravens defensive coordinator, Ravens offensive coordinator, who's his name's skipping my mind right now. Todd Monken and Mike Vrabel. There's possibly Dan Quinn. There's a lot of potential head coaches out there. So for the New England Patriots, I would think usually when you see a team have a defensive minded head coach and it doesn't work out, they'll go with an offense, and if that doesn't work out, they just kind of repeat the same pattern. With a new era of offense, and I'm an offensive guy, I'd like to see these teams go with an offensive minded head coach, especially to pair with a quarterback. You would like to see that. Although I do think, and I'm not opposed to going defensive minded, I just think that you have to find a high level offensive coordinator, kind of like what the Falcons did when they went to the Super Bowl. Although we do know the result of that, and what the Texans have done so far. Defensive minded head coach, but the offensive coordinator has been stellar and A+, and it can level itself out when you go that way, and it just proves to show that there's not just one recipe for success. There's actually multiple. And then now for the Alabama Crimson Tide. Nick Saban has built an empire over there. He set the standard high, then became that standard and set the bar levels and levels high once again. It's he's ruled over college football for so many years, and he's coached all these fantastic, phenomenal football players, whether that was at LSU or Alabama. I mean, just to name a couple names like Marlon Humphrey, Jalen Hurts, Tua Tagovailoa, Calvin Ridley, Julio Jones, Ryan Clark, Andrew Whitworth. And there's still names I can't even think of, but the amount of players and stars that he sent out to the league at both LSU and Alabama, the teaching that he incorporated, the mentality he instilled, his motivational speeches, philosophy of football, and how he sees football differently, and how you can apply football to many aspects of life. I remember watching he was doing I think it was a Zoom call or with some kind of speech interview. He's talking about the two most compelling words in the NFL players draft report are and but. And talking about, he used the instance of a defensive back. He gets good grades in school, model citizen, does what he does, and then football wise, he's got good technique, all of these sorts of attributes you look for a defensive back. And then just take the same player, but gets into trouble, maybe isn't the best teammate, has a couple of instances with the law, all that sort of thing, drug abuse, whatever. And the moral of that story, or what he's saying, is people, when you enter your name for a job, or in the case of football, the NFL draft, people are looking for reasons not to take you, and reasons why they shouldn't take you, reasons why they should. And the moral is, don't give them a reason why they shouldn't take you. And then I remember, I think if someone had a clip on there, I think it was on TikTok. He has them running sprints for practice, and he tells them, If you ran the last one faster than the other two sprints, what's holding you back? And his general message there is your talent is your greatest weakness when it comes to your mindset. And he says that a lot of these high school players, they arrive on campus and they think that just because they have talent that they can get by, when in fact that isn't necessarily the case. You have to put in the hard work, all of those sorts of things. How he goes about teaching, just something I studied from him and got to find out his perspective of football, because this is someone that set the standard high, became the standard, won all kinds of national championships. I don't know if we're ever going to see somebody replicate, duplicate, mimic what he did at his level. Now, if you're a Tide fan, it all becomes about who is going to fill in Nick Saban's shoes, because it's huge shoes to fill. And a lot of people in Alabama, boosters, the fans, they're still going to want to have that same standard just because that's the pedigree that they've had, that's the pedigree that they've been used to and accustomed to. Who necessarily, I don't know. I mean, maybe they go out with Kirby Smart. I think you see what kind of the shockwaves that it had. Like, they had a 5-star wide receiver, Ryan Williams, decommit after he saw the news. Tide fans, I know, are afraid that maybe a lot of their players, their commits, are going to now all of a sudden decommit, because everyone goes to Alabama to get coached under Nick Saban, go to the NFL, get developed, and that sort of deal. Well, now that he's gone, are we going to have someone at that same pedigree and same level? I don't necessarily know. Just looking at the potential head coaches, I mean, they're talking about Lane Kiffin. I don't know if he's built for Alabama. Lanning would have been the home run grand slam hire, but he's going to stay at Oregon. There's been a lot of talk about Deion Sanders. That is a huge possibility, but I don't. If that happens, I don't see it happening this year, just because I think Deion still wants to stay one more year at Colorado with Travis Hunter and of course his son Shadur. I don't see him going there this year until once Shadur goes to the NFL draft. So does Travis Hunter. Then maybe he's possibly thinking about it. The one dark horse I think everyone has to pay attention for here is Mike Norvell, the Florida State head coach. Because Mike Norvell, and when Florida State didn't get into the college football playoff, even though they went undefeated in their conference, how can you expect your head coach to still coach over there? And if I'm Mike Norvell, now that the Alabama head coach position is open, I think it would be wise to go there. Because if you stay at Florida State, you've seen there's a lot of, they've had some decommits. The 5-star KJ Bolden, he's decommit, went to Georgia. When they didn't make the playoffs, it made his job 10 times harder than it needed to be. Now, how is he going to convince these recruits that when they do come to Florida State, they can compete for national championships, not only get developed, but have, like I said, national championships, be onto the big stage, and that sort of thing. So I think Mike Norvell is the one we really have to pay attention to here for Alabama. But of course, let me know what y'all think in the comments about these coaches that we all grew up watching. Saban, Carroll, Belichick, now taking a step down. We don't know about Bill Belichick. Maybe he gets another head coaching opportunity. But for all these coaches, congrats to them. We think and memorize the pedigree they set, the teams that they had, the players that they coached, and really how it made everybody feel. Because a lot of sports is not really, they win games and all of that sort of thing, but it's about how you make fans feel. Fans that take time out of their day and are so passionate within that team, the university, the players and coaches. How you make them feel with what they've accomplished. Now, to elaborate a little bit more about Alabama, just to take in the significance of this, because for many years and my entirety of watching college football, it was always with recruiting, championships, everything. It was always Alabama in the field. Although there was that time frame and era where Clemson and Deshaun Watson, Trevor Lawrence, they kind of took it over a little bit, right? We know the back and forth that Clemson and Alabama had, but for many years it was Alabama in the field for everything. Now, it feels like we got a little taste test of it just because of everything changing in college football with NIL, the transfer portal, Saban's method of coaching. You can't get like you can't cuss out guys, get as hard on them in practice and in drills because you might fear that if I do that, they're going to enter the transfer portal. But the severity of it levels the playing field, but then it says who is going to be the new master of college football, or is it just going to be an equal distribution? And I have to say, regarding Alabama in the field, it was a little bit of Clemson challenged it, and then of course later on and recently, Georgia's challenged that for quite some time. I think the next like big powerhouse in college football to take over Alabama's place, I would have to say is Georgia right now, just because Kirby Smart, what he's done, 2 national championships, really almost could have been a third. They did, losing to Alabama, and then they didn't get a bid in the college football playoff. I feel like if they did, they could have challenged Michigan, although they didn't. So we really can't say no for sure that was going to be the case. But I would have Georgia up there as being that next empire to take over Alabama's place in college football. But let me know what y'all think in the comment section, all of those sorts of things. And I love your participation and all that sort of stuff. So the NFL playoffs start Saturday, and the first game that were available to watch. Now, some of you may or may not be available to watch it just because it's going to be on Peacock, the streaming service. It's the Houston Texans and Cleveland Browns, 2 Coach of the Year candidates and 2 teams that are getting hot at the right time. Starting off with the Cleveland Browns, what Kevin Stefanski has done with that unit and all the injuries that he's had to face is phenomenal. Well done job. And I also think we have to give a lot of credit to Andrew Berry, the general manager, just because his eye for talent and drafting, the acquisitions that he's made is suitable for if this team goes down with injuries like what they've had to deal with this year. And now recently Denzel Ward injured his knee in practice. They don't know if he's going to be available for this game. But what Stefanski, the Browns, and Andrew Berry have done, props to them. They're a team that is in the wild card round, not a divisional leader, but I could see going to an AFC championship game and possibly a Super Bowl. Now, it all depends on the play of Joe Flacco, because we've seen a lot of backup quarterbacks or kind of journeyman quarterbacks that they're not starters and we don't really expect much of them. So the bar's not necessarily that high, that have gone out and had these types of Linsanity runs, but then eventually these Linsanity runs go down. We saw it with Josh Dobbs, and we saw it with Browning, and all sorts of other quarterbacks, many quarterbacks that I can't name right now. So how good of the play is Joe Flacco? Now, I do think they have, a perfect system in place for him. He's got Amari Cooper. He has David Njoku. And with Joe Flacco being the quarterback for the Browns, Njoku's production has gone up. They have a good offensive line. Now, they do have some injuries on that offensive line, but it's still good enough. The run game is very strong. Play action, they do all these sorts of things really well. But it depends on the play of Joe Flacco, because now this is the playoffs. And the playoffs are a different beast. Every weakness that you have is brought to light. And then now for the Houston Texans, DeMeco Ryans, CJ Stroud. What they've done, being 10-7, having the 2nd overall pick last year, speaks for itself. For the Houston Texans, their recipe for winning is going to be how much they can get into on the run game, and they can't necessarily abandon it. Like, they don't have the offensive lineman that can go, and I don't think any team really has the offensive lineman in the league that can go toe to toe with the Cleveland Browns pass rush and Myles Garrett. So they're going to have to rely on a lot of 12 personnel, these tight ends that can block, a lot of play action, run game, just because in a rookie's first ever postseason start, you don't want CJ Stroud to be under duress. So it's going to be a lot of run game. And then defensively, it also relied, it's the playoffs. It's not ironic or weird to say that run game matters. For the Texans defense, they're going to have to stop that run game. And are you going to mirror Derek Stingley with Amari Cooper that much? And then what types of contributions do you get, and how can you limit Njoku's production? When these two teams played, although it's completely different, the Texans really didn't have that much. It was a blowout game on Christmas Eve. Usually when two teams that met in the regular season face off in the playoffs, the reverse happens, meaning that the team that lost in the regular season wins the postseason game. So it'll be interesting to see. A lot is going to be dependent on the run game. If who can run it well, set up their play action, get the one-on-ones, the looks that they want, and that sort of deal. Now, the Texans have struggled with the run game at times, but then there's at times where they make the right in-game adjustments, which is going to be key too. And the thing that works well for the Texans is they played physical running teams, like the Tennessee Titans and the Indianapolis Colts. Now, do they have the offense? Do the Titans and Colts have the offensive line that the Cleveland Browns do? Absolutely not. But stopping Derrick Henry, whether or not he has a fantastic offensive line in front of him, is hard to do. And Jonathan Taylor, stopping him and limiting his production is hard enough to do. Now, it hasn't looked pretty from the Houston Texans, and that's because they're a young team. They don't shut teams out early. So it is going to be close. But it'll be interesting to watch two teams that are getting hot at the right time. Now, secondly, and this one's going to be fun to watch for a different reason, and it's going to be because of the weather. It's being reported that in KC it's going to be, I think, 10 degrees outside with, gusts of winds moving at miles per, double-digit miles per hour. So it'll be interesting to see how a kind of warm weather team whose identity really matches it, which is they're not as physical. And if you listen to this podcast and you heard me talk about the Miami Dolphins, my biggest issue with them is that they're not physical. Like, they can run to the C gap and outside the tackle, all of that, but in the A and B, what can they really do? Between the center and the guards, what run game do they have? And then how does Tua perform in cold weather? Now, we've seen how they've performed against teams that are, I guess, as good and similar to them. I guess you could say when they played Dallas, they won that game, and that's something you really like. And for the haters, it's something against you. But how do they play in this cold weather? Because it's not going to be passing the football. It's going to be running the football. And then here comes, Isaiah Pacheco. In this cold weather, the Chiefs, they're not going to be passing the ball. Neither team is really. But with Isaiah Pacheco and his physical style of running, I think that's something they have to rely on. Like, Mahomes is probably going to throw the ball 20 times. And because if you've ever played in cold weather, especially football, you understand that those hits and hitting that turf feels like concrete, feels like pavement, and then that football feels like a rock. And having to catch a football that feels like a rock when Mahomes has got a cannon of an arm isn't fun to do. It's going to be interesting. We'll see. We'll see how bad the weather is for kickoff and for the game. But I still like the Kansas City Chiefs. And if that does happen, it's going to be Patrick Mahomes on the road, most likely in the divisional round. So we'll see how that goes. We'll see how the Dolphins perform when it isn't a to the hashes, to the sideline, outside the numbers, you know, circus kind of game. And then now we have 2 games on Sunday. Steelers Bills. Before I talk about this matchup, you have to give massive credit to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, it feels like it's just the Tomlin way, right? They don't have you look at preseason, they don't have the roster. They really don't have as much on the offense or defensive side of the ball, but they still find a way to be above 500, and then being above 500, they sometimes have the luxury of going to the playoffs, which is what the position that they're in right now, playing up against the Buffalo Bills, and this is a different Buffalo Bills team than the one we saw in November. And the reason for that is because of their offensive coordinator, Joe Brady. What Joe Brady did at LSU, I mean, fantastic. Now, he did have all these playmakers, but the looks, the way he was able to cover their weaknesses, show their strengths, and showcase that, speaks volumes. Then he comes over with the Buffalo Bills, and they're a different football team. They're a football team that's just not solely relying on Josh Allen. They can run the football. They can run it up the middle. And all of it goes from the identity that everyone loves of the Buffalo Bills. It's something refreshing to see because it's not Allen throwing the ball 35 to 45 times a game, having to make these wild throws. It's just playing within a structure of an offense that helps this team, and then you see McDermott's getting things together. They've had tons of injuries, the Bills have, to their defense. You lose Milano early in the year. You lose Trey White early in the year. You sign a bunch of guys, and it's working. So they're a team that's scary. I fully expect the Bills to win, but you never know with the Steelers team and a Mike Tomlin team that just somehow, some way seems to find a way. Now, next game, this team is getting hot at the right time, and that's the Green Bay Packers. They'll be facing off against the Dallas Cowboys in Big D. We know typically in these matchups in the playoffs where it's gone, but I think this time it goes with Dallas. For the obvious reasons. It's going to be Jordan Love's first playoff game. This is a young Packers offense. How are they going to perform? I'll say that the thing that the Packers can look to is how they, playing the Detroit Lions and how they had to guard Aiden Hutchinson. Because you look at the Cowboys pass rush, and it's all just Michael Parsons. Like, DeMarcus Lawrence will have occasional showings, and he might have a huge one this game. But for a majority of the time, and what you get familiar with, it's just been Micah Parsons. So it's going to be a lot of somewhat 12 personnel, 2 tight ends, and then a tackle. A lot of things that Micah Parsons is going to expect. And can they do it? Now, for the Packers, Love is playing confidently. He's getting to the top of his drop. He's seeing things well. He's seeing the middle of the field well. Decisive with his reads. But like I said, the playoffs are a different beast, and especially if you're a young player that's in your first playoff game, we'll see how he handles that. And the Packers are calling when I watched that Bears game, they were just absolutely, they were scheming things up. LaFleur was in his bag, and their run game was working. And the run game is something they really haven't had all year, but now they're getting the key pieces back with Christian Watson will be back. That's their deep threat. Aaron Jones has been back, and they've run the football well. If you want to beat the Dallas Cowboys, you just layer coverage to CeeDee Lamb. Now, I don't expect Jair to shadow CeeDee Lamb. I just think they're going to layer coverage to him. And then when you're on offense, going up against that Dallas defense, of course, obviously limit Parsons. But their linebackers are small and run sport. And Buffalo Bills showed that you can run the ball between the guards, between the center, any day. If the Packers can do that and get into the offense and looks that LaFleur wants, if you can run that football, they're going to have a lot of success. And the X factor in this game is going to be Rashawn Gary. While secondly, for Dallas, their X factor is going to be, can they run the football? Because we've seen that they're throwing the football. Dak's having this great stats wise year and all of those sort of things. Many have him as an MVP candidate. But can they run the football? Like Mark McCarthy said, his goal when he got to Dallas, or this year when he fired Kellen Moore, was to run the football. They haven't done that. Maybe it's their offensive line is just fantastic in pass pro, and run blocking they really can't do. Maybe it's Tony Pollard is hurt. Whatever it is, they can't do it. Be interesting. I think Dallas is going to blow them out. And then in the wild card, another Sunday game. Who couldn't have wrote this any better, right? The Rams and Detroit Lions. Stafford going back to Detroit. For the Lions, it's going to be the status. Well, who knows about the status of Sam Laporta? Losing him was huge. If he does play this game, like I said, who knows the status of that? And the Lions secondary up against the Rams wide receiver core of Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. The Rams offensive line, I have to say, is suspect. So it's going to have to be a lot of blitzes from the Detroit Lions. But if you're the Detroit Lions, do you really want to blitz a lot when you know that you have a struggling secondary? Yeah, you got C.J. Gardner-Johnson back, but you want your struggling secondary to up against Nacua and Cooper Kupp. Lions going to have to run the ball. And then, of course, the Rams secondary is really suspect as well. If they can hold up by Jared Goff enough time, I like the Detroit Lions in this game, and I'm going to go with them. And just because this is a ticked off Lions team that really, I'll just say it, they got screwed against Dallas. So the Lions are a ticked off team wanting to face Dallas if that is the potential matchup. Now the last game, wild card round, Monday night, ESPN, Philadelphia Eagles, and Tampa Bay Buccaneers. If you asked me last week, I thought the Eagles should have sat their starters. Yes, you could get into a rhythm, but Dallas was going to beat the Commanders easily, which they did. You struggled up against the Giants, even when you had Devontae Smith. Then you got more injuries, you accrued more injuries just playing that game. It was give your team a bye week, give your staff a bye week to get everything right. Find some kind of game plan that works. And in terms of who I like in this game, it's a fresh start for the Philadelphia Eagles. Sirianni's message was that it's 0-0. But there's just no rhythm, and maybe they know that they had a tough schedule, and especially in November, so they took a couple of games off. I don't buy that as much. I like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in this game. Now they haven't played great. Like these are both teams that haven't played great as well. But of course, it's the playoffs. Surprises happen. We all know the surprise will happen with Tebow Mania. No one expected them to get to the playoffs and then win a playoff game with Tim Tebow up against a Dick LeBeau defense. It's the playoffs. Magic happens. I still will go with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in this game just because I feel more confident in them than Philadelphia, and Tampa Bay's more healthier. But like I said, it's the playoffs. Magic happens. So those are that's my wild card recap right there. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Which team is going to go far, have a potential Super Bowl run, because we see it every year, and maybe not even a Super Bowl run, but a championship game appearance. Let me know what you think in the comment section. I appreciate all of your guys' support, my subscribers, followers. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you all so much. You mean a lot to me. Don't forget to follow me on social media. The links will be in the description of this video. I appreciate it. Thank you. So now, who should win Rookie of the Year? And I'd have to say, in my opinion, this has been one of the most competitive Rookie of the Year battles we've got to witness in quite some time. And I'm talking more so towards Offensive Rookie of the Year. You have Puka Nacua and the type of season that he's had. And not only like the individual stats, but then his team also going to the playoffs, how much of a factor he has been for them, how big of a piece he's been, filling in into what I would have to say right now, he's filling in to be their wide receiver one right now. And a lot of that is due to, Cooper Kupp was hurt, but also when Cooper Kupp has been in the lineup too, Nakuma's just been as fantastic. And then you go to CJ Stroud and the storyline that is. Houston Texans, rookie head coach, rookie quarterback, going to the playoffs. Not only go to the playoffs too, they win their division. I mean, it's tough. This is tough to really look at. And then you consider both, they broke records as rookies. Teams are going to the playoffs, fantastic seasons. You just have to. I think the splitting hair is you look at, well, which one's been tougher. Right now, I'd say the one that's been tougher is the quarterback, and I feel like that's where the media is and all these people that are, I guess, votes count or matter in this type of award decision. I think they're gonna give that a little bit more significance, and I think that's when we're talking about splitting hairs here. That's the thing that splits hairs is CJ Stroud being a rookie quarterback doing this. Watching that game against the Indianapolis Colts, the throws he was making, like he was under duress. I won't say a majority of the game, but at crucial times in the game, like at the wrong time in the game when the Texans are behind the sticks, he's having to go off script, scramble outside the pocket, makes that throw to Nico Collins, and then threading the ball, like just threading the ball into some tight windows, especially on that drive where they got the touchdown to go up 23-17. Right there, that pass to Nico Collins, and just the pressure that's been put on him to deliver in those types of moments, and he's delivered as a rookie quarterback. And the comebacks that the comebacks that he has so far into his rookie campaign, I think they give it to Stroud. Now it depends on how far. It's not over yet. Decision and award isn't being given out today. It depends on how far these teams go. Because if the Houston Texans are able to beat the Cleveland Browns, who's one of the hottest teams, if not in the NFL, in the AFC, now they'd most likely go play. I can't say for sure who they'd go play, but then they go win the divisional round, and now in the AFC Championship game, I would figure that they would give it to Stroud. But then let's say on the other hand, it's for Puka Nacua. His team they win, they go to the NFC Championship game. I also think, we're talking about splitting hairs now, but how teams they perform in the playoffs also does matter as well. So let me know, those of you listening to this podcast, if this is your first time listening to this podcast, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, hit the bell, turn on post notifications, leave a comment in the comment section about who you think should win Rookie of the Year, what you think of this podcast, what type of content I should come out with. If you want me to talk about your team and the types of where they need to improve, what their draft strategy should be, let me know in the comments. I appreciate it. Thank you for your support. That just about wraps up this week's podcast. I appreciate spending my time to talk football with y'all. It means a lot to me. Y'all mean a lot to me, my subscribers, followers. Check the description. The links to my social media will be in there, so make sure you follow me there. Follow me on TikTok, Spotify, YouTube, Twitter, all that sort of deal. Don't have an Instagram yet, but I'll surely get that soon. Gonna do a lot of film breakdowns, prospect rankings, just because now we're entering. It's sad that the NFL's regular season's gone, but then we have the postseason. For a lot of NFL fans, you don't have the postseason to look forward to. It's draft time, free agency time. Still, even though the season's at its twilight, lots to talk about, lots of fun. Appreciate y'all. God bless y'all. Have a fantastic day. Have a fantastic weekend. Stay safe out there. And once again, until next time, deuces.